The council will please come to order. I am going to read an abbreviated version of the orders referencing the governor's executive order. The council will seek to comply with the director's executive 7B-1 issued by Governor Ned Lamont, which was on March 14, 2020, together with any executive orders subsequently issued which pertain to such meetings. The mayor, members of the city council, the city manager, city clerk, comptroller, corporate council are to be present in person, but separated by appropriate social distancing at council chambers, or participate remotely by conference call, video conference, or other technologies. Tonight's meeting resumes a meeting postponed a week ago tonight, and I declare the meeting open. Resolution 1.
Is the resolution on the table? Or?
She just has that.
Number 1, old business, relative to the adoption of the budget for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Thank you. The budget as amended at subsequent meetings and such is before us. Is there further discussion? President Pro Tem Mark Betancourt.
The first piece would be to amend the resolution in the last line. So I'm going to propose that we amend the second line from the bottom to change the date from June 1st, 2020 to June 8th, 2020. And we'll be doing that for the subsequent two resolutions.
Thank you. Is there a second? Alderman Wilson. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderman DeLucia.
No, I'm sorry, not on this motion. No, thank you.
Oh, okay. Seeing, yes, Comptroller, please.
The budget was also amended on June 1st.
Correct.
That date and
Was it? Did we? Oh, that's right, the revenue stuff. Capital budget.
Capital
That's right.
budget was amended.
So, okay, so then I would change the motion just to add the date of June 8th, 2020, rather than change the date. Of June
Rather than delete June 1st,
and,
correct.
yeah, rather than delete.
Is that agreeable with the seconder?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Motion is to simply add the June 8th to, as an amendment. Seeing no other discussion, call the roll on this, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes?
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Betancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
The vote is 7-0.
Motion passes 7-0. Is there further discussion? President Pro Tem Mark Betancourt.
We have three proposals to make regarding the budget. So we wish to amend the fiscal year 2021 budget. Everyone's been, we've handed out copies to everyone of what we're proposing. The first one is to transfer from NP revenue is a reduction by $900,000 on other financing sources on page 48. And on the other side is an increase, 49,194 other financing sources by $900,000 on page 123. With that and the effect of moving money from the general fund into the CCD. Number 2 would be to increase the Norwich Public Schools budget by appropriation from the city managers by $1,240,102 for a total appropriation in 2021 of $84,240,102. That appears on page 110. And then we have a schedule. For number 3, we have a schedule to leave vacant or delay for hire 4.5 full-time equivalent positions according to a schedule that's been handed out and given to the city clerk. And that total savings will come to $327,151 in savings, total salary and health insurance, FICA, and that. And so those are so I would motion for those three amendments to the fiscal year 2021 budget to be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second? Alderman DeLucia. Motion and seconded. Is there discussion? Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you. Wow, what a difference a week makes. In this past week, the casinos announced that they will slowly reopen this month. The governor announced that this month's phased-in reopening of the economy will be moved up by a few days. The state received $75 million in COVID-19 aid, with nearly $1 million coming to Norwich. Unemployment, while still high and still impacting many of our friends and neighbors, is reported to be falling faster than expected. And the NFA Foundation trustees and administration heard our concerns for education funding and stepped up with a $1.2 million gift to the city of Norwich by holding tuition flat for the upcoming school year. And for that, I am grateful. The pain clearly isn't quite over yet, but it seems that the sky isn't falling after all. My colleagues and I have been busy trying to find the best of all bad options for this budget. Though painful in some ways, I believe that we have delivered on our promise of an honest and responsible budget. One last notable observation for this process. While we do have the majority, my caucus has been open and welcoming to ideas from all members of the council. The work of the ad hoc committee is the best example of that. Personally,
I'm sorry. I just got a report that there's a problem with the stream going out. So,
thank you. Should I continue?
I'm sorry.
Should I continue?
Yeah.
Personally, I enjoyed my conversations with Alderwoman Gould while we waded through the complexities of the school budget. However, I cannot say without disappointment that while we were repeatedly admonished to sharpen our pencils, not one concrete idea was offered up to help solve the budget riddle for the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Yes, Alderman Bettencourt.
There's no doubt that, some of these pieces are difficult to swallow. Nobody likes to, raise the mill rate. And that's what we're looking at here in a time where certainly there are still, while it's better than it was last week, there are still unknowns. But in looking at it, I think we certainly, discussed the Board of Ed budget and the ad hoc committee ad nauseum, I would have to say. It was pretty brutal. The hard questions were asked. I'm told that the stream is up now, Mike. The hard questions were asked, and there were a lot of answers, and I think it'd be fair to say that we weren't exactly happy about everything, but we started to develop a relationship that I think will serve us in good stead I hope in the future. So the committee, all the committee members except one, including the Republicans on the Board of Ed, voted for the 5.5% appropriation. Now, the amount we're talking about now isn't that 5.5%, it's less than that. But if you figure in the total savings with the NFA number, the net equivalent would essentially give them the same funds they would have had from what the budget was before. So for that, that 5.5% increase. The actual percentage increases, I think, is 3.95% for their budget in this proposal. And I think on a national level and even locally here, one of the things we've heard about is the needs of education and fairness for access to education. I'll tell you myself, and there are people sitting up here that sent their children, K through 8 to private school, and there's nothing wrong with that. I made that choice myself to send my children to parochial school, and that's okay. I had that choice. I could afford to make that choice and make that sacrifice. But there's a lot of families out there that do not have that choice, that do not have that opportunity. So I think it's incumbent upon us to try to support the Board of Ed in their endeavors to the extent to every extent that we possibly can. But we also have to have some level of balance to that. So we're not going to give them 9.11%. That isn't, and I think they agreed that that was not a reasonable amount. But I think what we're doing here is trying to give them a reasonable amount so that they could go forward if they tighten their belt and not tap into our undesignated fund balance again in the future, except for what could be a true emergency, like any other department would. So this is, I think when we started this process and we talked about this at ad hoc, that we thought that this budget would be something that nobody would be particularly happy about, and I think that's where we're going to be at here. But it's something that will probably work. There'll still be some pain for the Board of Ed, a lot of difficulties, because they're going to have to make some cuts from what their current spending plan is, and I expect that they'll live up to that obligation. I look forward to working with everybody in the future and taking a look at what and how we are spending money here in the city of Norwich, and possibly in the future establishing new priorities. Because I look at some of this stuff as an investment, prior to when we start talking about education, and some things are an investment after the fact that don't necessarily help us to grow in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Alderwoman Gould?
Here's what I know. The Board of Education budget represents 63% of the total budget of the city of Norwich. The city manager proposed $83 million out of $132 million. In the last 10 years, the Board of Education budget has increased by $20 million. So it is disingenuous to say that we're not investing in the education of our children. In the last 10 years, our student population has declined. The state of Connecticut was generous with COVID-19 related funds for the Board of Ed, giving them $1.9 million to cover their expenses. NFA has announced, with the financial assistance of the NFA Foundation, that tuitions will remain at their current levels for next year. And I applaud their efforts in recognizing the financial difficulties of the sending towns. So that was a $1.2 million savings. The state of Connecticut is projecting a $2 billion deficit, which will impact every city and town in Connecticut. The impact has yet to be quantified, but assuredly, the loss of the state revenue will be detrimental, and I hope we're not back here in 6 months' time, now looking for ways to cut. While our area employers are opening, Norwich still has the highest unemployment rate in southeastern Connecticut. And unfortunately, some businesses will not be able to overcome the losses they have suffered due to COVID-19, and their doors will remain permanently closed. And those jobs will be lost forever. As of June 4th, 3,600 NPU customers are behind in their utility bills to the amount of $1.6 million. I also know that some $20 million in state and federal grants are awarded to the Board of Education each year to support adult education, food service, preschool, regular and special ed. I also know that their Alliance District grant funding will increase by $1.2 million for next year. Here's what I don't know. Despite the fact that the Board of Education and the City Council Ad Hoc Committee met multiple times to discuss the Board of Education budget, in my mind, there's still a few questions that never got answered. The biggest one being, what is the total budget for the Norwich Board of Education? $83 million plus what? $84 million plus what? We have never been shown what they expect to receive in grant funding from the state of Connecticut or the federal government. Because those are our tax dollars too. They may be coming out of a different pocket, but they're your tax dollars and my tax dollars that are being supported, that are supporting education here in Norwich. I was told, and we've all seen the memo from the superintendent, that they don't know their grant funding until the fall. So how is it that I was able to find online the grant funding for the City of New London, Preston, Wyndham, Hebron, West Hartford, and Sprague, just to name a few, that know their grant funding for next year, but we don't? And the other big piece of the puzzle, how many people work for the Norwich Board of Education? And how did they come up with needing 103 more employees for the next coming year? We were told that, well, they haven't actually verified the number of employees that work for the Norwich Board of Education, and they need their HR department, finance department, and their grants manager to reconcile the employee count. How can they build a budget when they don't know what their grant funding is and they don't know how many employees they have? And we asked the questions, but we never really got the answers. Or the answers we got, to me, are unacceptable. That we don't know, they don't know how many employees they employ. An entity with a budget of close to $100 million should be able to clearly and concisely answer those questions. This is not the way to operate the Board of Education. I want to be able to explain to anybody that asks me how their money's spent, what they're spending it on. And right now, I can't. I take my responsibility to the taxpayers very seriously. I don't know how we can support an increase to the Board of Education budget without having answers to how our tax dollars are being spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Alderman Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to say I'm proud of where this budget landed within a week. We sat here last week saying a week wouldn't make a difference, and that, rushing through this process would have been the better option. And I think sitting here today, we all see that a week made a huge difference. Clearer picture, better vision, much more of a concrete idea of where things are headed within a week. We talk about the Board of Ed, and I can't sit here and let individuals to continue to play the blame game with the Board of Ed, because they're not the only part and the only problem where we've landed as this being our overall budget. Every part of this budget was tough. But you build a budget on your morals, on your beliefs, and where you want to see the city, the vision of the city grow. And I think that's what we did. Myself and my colleagues, we sharpened our pencils. None of the options are easy options to swallow, and they don't all solve every single problem that we have within the city. However, it gives us the best path forward right now. When we sit here, we talk about equity, and I think Alderman Betancourt put it best, is not everyone, we can't continue to think 10 and 20 years ago we've added $20 million to the education budget. Let's take a step back and look at where things have gone. We've got more individuals with special needs that we're taking care of. There are more mandates and things to have equitable education for every student, and we're doing our best here in the city to provide that. We all knew that 9% we were not going to be able to go there. But I think with the increase that we've sat on and decided on, it allows them to at least chart forward. This isn't a one-year discussion. This is a conversation that could have happened other councils ago. But we formed an ad hoc committee. We asked the hard questions. We're continuing that work. Does all our problems get solved in one budget? Absolutely not. Can we blame all of the shortfalls and things going on with this budget on the COVID-19? Absolutely not, because we would still be in this same position had there not been a virus. So I say all of that to say this. We work hard, and this process reflects the path we move forward from. We've got to stop the blame game of where things are. We know where the basics of all of Norwich Public Schools money goes. We may not know every single penny and dollar because, quite frankly, there are some grants that they still have to wait and see where that level lands. And they were transparent and honest about that since the beginning of this process back in February. However, we have basic numbers to know where many of these grants go. We know where certain after-school grants go. We know they have grants to help supplement education within classrooms. So to sit here and say that we don't know where all their grants are going and where all the grant funding is, we have an idea. We wouldn't have been able to create a budget. We wouldn't have went through the Board of Ed's budget process if we didn't have a roundabout, okay? That's just like us sitting up here making a budget and not knowing, we don't know what the total impact of revenue is gonna be come July, but we have to do our job to lead and do the best we can planning for this city. That's what they elected us to do, okay? Is every answer gonna be answered today? Absolutely not. But it's a work in progress as to where we head and where we move as a city. You can't criticize if you didn't bring any cuts, any ideas to bring things or bring change to the table. It's about everyone rolling up their sleeves, and I haven't seen ideas from everyone put on the table, okay? This plan that we're putting forward of delaying hiring goes into just what we passed just a few meetings ago, a hiring freeze. It allows for us to find savings where we can, and that's what we worked hard to do. So to sit here and to criticize different individuals, to criticize the Board of Education, they know they've got work that they've got to do. We lay the bottom line. They know, since we've been working as an ad hoc committee, where they need to go. It's our job to overhaul and work to make efficiencies in this overall process of the budget, how things work in the city, and that's what our job is. So this budget, although it was tough, although it's not where we're not going to satisfy every single person, that's the one thing you learn in life is we can't sit here and satisfy every single person, because there's going to be something that everyone doesn't like. But it's about compromise and finding the best possible solution that still allows us to work efficient as a city. And quite frankly, I think we did it being honest, transparent about where we were going with things. And we've actually offered solutions and ideas throughout this process. So I'm pretty comfortable with what we're presenting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Alderman Nash.
I would like to also thank the ad hoc committee for their work and efforts. I know it wasn't easy. I've sat up here for a while through quite a few budgets, and I understand the pains and the suffering of the school system and what they have to go through to get a budget passed. And I just want to remind everybody that that I've sat up here, and there was one year we did do a flat funding to the school board, but every year, even when many departments were taking 3 and 5 and sometimes more percentage cuts to their budgets, the school never was cut. They always received something. It may not have been what they wanted, and that's how it works in the world. You ask for one thing and you compromise on what you can get. It's the same thing with NFA. I'm not going to criticize anybody. I want to thank NFA for their thoughtfulness and their ability to alleviate some of the debt that we have to cover for our kids to go to those schools. So I just want to make sure everyone understands where I'm coming from. I always feel every year when I sit up here like some giant ogre, some horrible human being, because I say to the schools, we can't give you that much money. I get elected because one of my three things I always say that I support and want to encourage and try to endorse all the time is public safety, education, and infrastructure, and not necessarily in those orders. It's depending on who needs what the most. And for a couple of years, I've been pretty much on the school side. Even last budget, I helped get a little bit more than when we were originally offering them. But here's what I'm trying to say. They want 5.5, 9 point something. I mean, it was always up to 11, I think, early on in the negotiation period where they did come down and they did agree that they understood that was way too much burden on the taxpayer. And the COVID, you're right, we would still be in this situation regardless. I was hoping maybe our economy would be in a little better place so that some of the stuff that we would have to absorb in this budget could have been handled by the taxpayer. But we have taxpayers out there right now, and I get some emails and some phone calls, and I don't get inundated like some of you might get. I listen to some of you talk, and your phones never stop ringing, it seems. But I do get calls, and I get complaints, not solely complaints, but discussions about, taxpayers that can't pay their light bill, their car payments, buy food, pay rent. I remember I talked to a person the other day on the phone who hopes the governor does something where they don't have to pay the rent for the last couple months. And I was telling them to please don't feel like that's going to be a situation for you, and I don't want to see you get evicted. So make some kind of arrangements with your landlord. But we all have to share the difficulties. And we want to sit here and we talk about freezing budgets, freezing hirees, and I agree with some of them. There's no doubt about that. Some of the departments could probably live without one or two of these individuals. But we have a school that has been over budgeted the last few years. And you can make arguments because we didn't give them enough money, but whatever. I mean, I get paid so much, and I have to pay my lights and my mortgage and my car payment and my cell phone and my insurance and my groceries and my other things I have to pay for. And I can't go to my companies, the companies that my mortgage, and say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have enough money this week, so you're not getting mortgage. I could do that. And I've been in that situation in the past. So I do understand the struggles that some people are going through because I've been there myself. But the school hiring people. And when I say hiring, they're talking about laying off. But they're also hiring. So they're laying off the ground frontline individuals that our children need. If you want to use those words, our children need the paraprofessionals, those teachers that help, the assistants and stuff. But instead, they're hiring for other positions in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, $80,000 of dollars. And I don't understand that. You have a budget problem where you can't pay what you got, but you go out and hire people for $100,000+, but laying off a $35,000 a year gig because you don't have the money to pay that, and then you want to flip it. And then you want to come and say there's no music and there's no art. But what was more important was a position for $100,000 and something. That was more important than art or music. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm not trying to blame the schools or anything. I understand their special education needs. There's unfunded mandates that they have to cover. And I wasn't one of those people that sent their kids to to private school. Both my children went K to 12 in the North school systems. Both were honor roll students. Both went to college. That cost me, but their education in Norwich was incredibly adequate, and they gained much social skills and academics and stuff from our school systems. And our schools, it irks me a lot when I hear people say Norwich school systems are inadequate, and I say to those people, you don't know what you're talking about. I happened to work at another public school system for a little while, and let me tell you, the children in that school get quite a different educational experience, and that city's taxes are in the 60 mils. So throwing money at stuff isn't always the answer, because I know the school that I had worked at in the other school system got quite a bit of money, and it didn't help their test scores or made the school a better place. It just was more money thrown at it. And again, there were people making quite a bit of money working there, and I didn't understand that. So I just want to say that, again, I want to thank everybody for their commitment, and to say that we didn't come up with any answers of our own is a little disingenuous, because last year we were criticized for coming up with too many cuts and too many issues and too many recommendations, and so this year I was satisfied with the city manager's budget. I thought it was a good budget. I thought it was okay. I understood that school wasn't getting all it needed, but it would make the adjustments it would have to make, and to balance itself and to get itself going. And then when I hear they hired a bunch of positions at quite a bit of money, and then we're going to lay off others at lower income monies, it just didn't seem to make any sense to me. And so that's where I'm at. But I tried hard. I did make many, many phone calls, did speak to many, many people, and yeah, I felt the city manager's budget was adequate enough, and it kept the taxes manageable for everybody. And even though the pandemic hit us, we seem to be in a good spot, and that's from past councils, not just the ones that I've sat on, but the ones before me that set up the history of the city. So that's all I got. And again, I want to thank everyone for what they did do, and here we are. So thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? No? Okay. Speaking on the amendment, I'll be brief. I can count. So, this amendment spreads the fire tax citywide even further. That's what we're doing tonight, so let anyone have any doubts. That $900,000 shift will be felt by the people in the town who are served by volunteers, not directly by the paid department, but we're going to further bury the true cost of the paid fire department by granting an even larger subsidy at the expense of every taxpayer and every business in this city. Not the best foot forward when you're worried about the impact of the pandemic and the unemployment rates. And by the way, we have the highest unemployment rate in the state, not just Eastern Connecticut. That's where we stood 2 weeks ago. Highest in the state, highest unemployment. 11% of our people work at the 2 casinos. Many of them will not be hired back. Those jobs are gone. So when the tax collection rate falls, and you see that number at the end of July, ask yourself how you're going to pay for this budget, because you are going above and beyond what the city manager proposed. And I could have lived with that budget. In fact, I've never opposed a budget that John put forth. But I'm going to do that tonight after this amendment, because the things that have been added really are not a priority. You want to give more money for the schools, but you're going to lump $100,000 into a tennis court instead. That would pay for a teacher, a reading teacher, benefits, but you care more about a tennis court. That's not setting a priority. You heard about the shortfall in revenue, in payments to the NPU. It's $1.6 million right now. That's actually an improvement of $300,000 over last year, so that's a better trend. What you do not know about is the revenue estimates are now going to be $564,000 less for the next year. They had projected a 9.1 payment based on what was earned last time. Well, that's going to go down by over $500,000. The Pequot Fund, they has not made a payment to the state, and it'll be 3 months. What's our Pequot grant? Take 1/4 of that away right now. Just doing some averaging. it'd probably be even higher hit. The revenue we anticipate for next year is not coming. It is not coming. And the disparity between growth in the Board of Education's budget, who for the third year in a row is running a deficit in the $1 million range, third year in a row, and yet they continue to hire new positions. I don't know a business that can sustain or survive who does that, but that's what happens in Norwich. I too want to thank NFA. I was on the phone with the trustees before the meeting and after the meeting, and I can tell you, all those increases that came off the table, they're coming back next year. They're not gone. It's a one-year reprieve. So add that concern, that cost to next year's calculation when you try to put a budget together. It's going to be daunting. I guess that's enough. I'm opposed to the amendment, and I'll let it rest with that. Is there further discussion? Yes, Alderman Bettencourt.
Regarding the transfer from NPU, I think for this is basically a reversal of a trend that happened in previous years. So, in my opinion, I'll let the others in my caucus speak for themselves. 53% of NPU assets are in the CCD. I wanted to, and after having money moved into the general fund from that CCD revenue in the past, I thought it would be appropriate to return it in order to lessen the impact of the mill rate in the CCD. And that's one of the things we had heard from residents of the CCD on a regular basis to try and do something to help them. And in this case, I think it's justified. I don't see why we should not be helping those residents that are bearing this burden. The public schools increase, much more difficult to deal with. Am I happy with all the answers I got? No. But truthfully, I think you take a look at the Board of Ed and the services that are provided to the children in this city, and you see what's missing. And that, to me, is probably the biggest bellwether as to, what we should be doing with funding in the Board of Education. Because what family with disposable income is going to want to move and live and spend money in the city of Norwich that has a substandard education system? What opportunities are we given to the other children that are already here? These are the questions that I ask myself that I have a hard time, dealing with in the negative when people want to say no and not raise the funding for the Board of Ed. Now, the last 3 years, I will say the Board of Ed has overspent their allocated budgets. We've had these conversations. I do not agree that that's something that should have happened. I'm adamantly opposed to allowing it to happen in the future. I will stand up and be counted in regards to that. But with that said, nobody sitting here did anything about it for the last 3 years. So I think you look in the mirror on this one, folks, because we've only got ourselves to blame for allowing this to go on. So for my money, I'm saying put a stop to it right here. This is the allocation they're getting. This is the allocation we need to make them stick to. We're more than fair with this allocation, I think. Are they going to have to make some cuts off their spending plan? Yep. They're going to have to 3 or 4% there that they're going to have to cut off of what their spending plan is already. But it's the only way it's going to happen and not impact our unrestricted fund balance. And we just can't allow that to happen anymore. So with that said, obviously, nobody touched on, the one savings piece in this budget, and that's the employee pieces. I will mention that those pieces are basically just putting off filling, and for the most part anyway, filling positions. A couple of cases we won't fill the positions at all this year, but the rest are all partial fills for part of the year. So, but I appreciate the help of the city manager in putting that list together and trying to, and trying to squeeze a few dollars out of the budget. That's the kind of help we usually need up here, and I appreciate the effort.
Thank you. Mr. Nash?
I just want to make a comment on the NPU funding.
Your mic's not on.
I just want to make a comment about the NPU funding. We've been giving a percentage of that funding to the CCD, which I agreed with. We did cut it a while back to alleviate some of that burden. When you say 53 or 43% of their assets are in the CCD, you're correct. I did do some research and tried to come up with a different system, because I believe that if we were going to augment the CDC's funding, then we should augment it appropriately. And so I called NPU and I asked how much money that is raised through gas and electricity and water, what are we paying for as gas and electricity? And so I asked how much of that money comes from the CCD versus the TCD, and to my surprise, because I'll be honest with you, I sat up here praying to God that it would have been a substantial difference, but I found out, and the reality is, the huge portion of NPU's funding comes from the TCD district. And it makes sense after I thought about with the different companies that were there, buying gas and electricity, and a lot of our businesses in the TCD versus some of our smaller businesses in the CCD, and most of the CCD is residential versus the TCD. But so when you say that there's a large portion of the assets belonging to NPU in the CCD, you're absolutely correct. And if you really think about the money we already transfer from that fund to the CCD, it does work out to be equitable, an equitable contribution to the CCD and its tax base. And believe me, I'm the one that sits up here preaching that if the CCD was to go over 50 mills, it could be the end of the city of Norwich as far as the downtown goes, because who would want to spend 50 mills when they can go out and spend 42 mills in the outside district? So, and I have a special place, and I'm not from Connecticut, I'm not from Norwich, I didn't grow up here, but I do love the downtown, I love Norwich, and I don't want to see our downtown struggle. When I first became a police officer here in the 80s, I saw lots of shops. There was a shoe store and a magazine place and a couple other things. And I remember the old-time officers telling me, you don't know anything, Nash. This place used to be the place. And he goes, it's been going downhill. It's depressing. And I'm thinking, wow, it's depressing? And I thought it was awesome. But what I do see now in the last several councils, businesses coming back, restaurants opening, interest in Norwich, a couple years. I know it's been a couple years because the pandemic did hurt us a little bit, but we had our taxes going in the right place. Our schools were struggling. I'm not going to deny that. But again, to say that they were inadequate or not providing what the students needed, I think is wrong. Again, I haven't been in the schools for a while because I was the DARE officer for many years. But I can only speak from when my children got out of the school system. And so the NPU funding that we give now, if you really want to go down to brass tacks, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, I'm not a numbers person, but I did call and I did do my research, my due diligence, and the money that we already transfer is fair and equitable for what the CCD contributes to the NPU fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Alderwoman Gould.
So I just want to clear up a couple of things. A few years back, we did transfer $500,000 from the CCD back to the general fund, because that contribution from NPU is supposed to be for the benefit of everyone. But when we did that, the CCD did not see any change in their mill rate. We were Josh was working those numbers up to the minute. The 5.5% increase that the Board of Education approved, and with the money that you've proposed to give the proposed increase to them tonight, still makes a $1.2 million deficit. Now, hopefully, they can find out how to make those cuts, because it's not our job as the city councilor to tell them what to cut. That's not our job. That's the Board of Education's job. And every year we give them a budget, and they don't live within their budget every year. Now, if the police department and the fire department and the public works department were all going over budget every year, somebody's head would be rolling. Because we can't do that. You have to live within your budget. So if they can't make $1.2 million worth of cuts, then I hope that everybody sitting up here is going to hold fast to they can't use the undesignated fund balance as their private bank account when they can't make their cuts, because they're going to be coming to us in a few months to tell us how short they are, and they're going to need a transfer. And now, for 2021, they're going to have to make $1.2 million worth of cuts, and when they can't, and they come back to us and say they need a transfer, I hope everybody's going to remember that they said, oh, we need to hold their feet to the fire. And I don't think there's anybody sitting up here that said that the education that the children are getting in the city of Norwich is inadequate. I never said that, and I never pointed my finger at anyone. All I'm saying is that if you are going to put together a budget, then we should have the complete picture, not just what you want from the general fund, the complete total budget of what the City of Norwich Board of Education is going to be spending on education. And yes, I'm sure, Alderman Wilson, they have an idea. I'm sure they do. But I want to see the idea in black and white. In black and white. And yes, if something gets cut, then they can show me, well, you know when we said we thought we were getting $4 million to that, we didn't get it. But we haven't seen anything in black and white. That's all I'm pointing out. Not pointing fingers. But if other towns can put it in black and white, we should be able to as well.
Alderman Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, let me start by saying you talk about the tennis courts and different things of that sort. If we look back, tennis courts is a capital improvement project. At the end of the day, that we talk quality of life. There's things that need to be done. We can't continue to put off every project and not do certain things. You have to, it goes back to the point that Alderman Betancourt made about you have to invest in your community. So we can't continue to sit here and say, it's too much money, we're just gonna not do it. We have to take sometimes a vision, you have to have vision and taking a step in improving the quality of life opportunities in the city. So I think to say that, that wasn't an area, it's a capital improvement area. We have to spend a certain level. The other part, going back to education, is education's not black and white. I think that's the thing. Any of us who work in education, have worked in education, know education's not black and white. There have been many of years when they come back and they hear from the state that certain grants are being cut after the school year starts. But the other part that we have to look at is they're right now in the planning process of what next year looks like for many of their students. So to sit here and say that they have all the answers on what the money or level of spending, that just is hard to put. But the other part I will say is when we look at grants and we look at the money that they're spending within the system, a lot of times those numbers are there. So they may tweak every once in a while up or down. The other part is we can't keep comparing ourselves to some of these smaller sending towns. We're an alliance district. We have a lot more need in this community than many of our surrounding towns. We have a larger enrollment than many of our surrounding towns. And we can't continue to think that we put ourselves in a box like every other surrounding town, because that just wouldn't be the right way to calculate education. So I think to sit up here, like I said before, and continue to criticize where things have gone, that's not going to help us move forward. I think we started the conversation, things were put on the table as ideas to bring down the overall costs, to give the school system what we felt we could afford and what they continue to need. This isn't a one-year fix. We know that we've got we were elected to do the hard work. So to say that next year's budget, we've got all these things to worry about, we got to take it one step at a time. And quite frankly, you know, when you look at the CCD and we talk about the money allocation, Alderman Nash hit it right on the head. Much of the CCD is residential. So to expect that same level of contribution and revenue from a highly residential area, which I'll point out has many apartments, and not just homes, you have individuals that aren't paying that same level of revenue in the CCD as they are in the TCD. So to want the same level of revenue from one side to the other, doesn't make full sense. You know, but I think the part that I'm not going to sit here and we're not going to continue to do is criticize. We've got to move forward. We've put a plan together that we feel is the right way to go with the current circumstances we're in. And we know we have to live with it. Is everyone going to be happy? Absolutely not. But I think this leads us to a vision moving forward of supporting our educational system, improving quality of life in the city of Norwich, all while doing things that help us not take the tax rate over 50 mils, which I think we did. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Representative Ella Miles.
Thank you, Mayor.
Excuse me, Alderman Ella Miles.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this was a tough budget. You know, I know the school board wanted their 5.5%. In reality, the city can't afford it. That's the bottom line. If we get more revenue in the city, you know, that may change. But I think we tried to be as fair as possible. We knew the 2.4% that the city manager had proposed wasn't quite enough. Even the 3.95%, it gives them a little bit more. We know it's still not going to necessarily meet their needs, but it's what they're going to have to work with. And I do echo the sentiments of the other city council members that the general fund is off limits. Board of Ed cannot overspend. They're going to have to make hard decisions, and just like we had to make hard decisions up here. Other than that, all I can say is this is, you know, step one in the process. We tried to be equitable across the board, give a little bit of reprieve to the CCD, and you know, not have their mill rate creeping up close to 50. I think we put our best foot forward on this one. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? I have questions of Comptroller, please.
Yes, good evening, Mayor.
The reserve fund balance, where does it stand at this current time as a percentage of last year's budget expenditures? I thought it was 10 point something.
Yeah, it's depending on how the schools end up this year, it should be a little over 10%.
What's available above the 10%, which we by ordinance cannot go below in the account?
Just, you know, a few $100,000.
Few $100,000, that's all that's legally available I want that on the public record for anybody who's listening right now. There is no pot of gold to pick this year. So I guess we'll all be waiting with bated breath their actions tomorrow night at their Board of Ed meeting. We've seen a list of proposed schedule of potential cuts, but they now know, and it's on public record, that there is no money here for them to just dip into, unless the majority of this council, again, is going to amend the ordinance and lower the threshold below 10%. But then you can look at the interest rates on our debt service being increased. So there's another hit coming if that is forced to happen by their lack of action. My last comment will be, if you really want to help the residential members of the double tax district, look at the size and scope of the paid fire department. Ask questions, is it overstaffed? If you compare it with other departments in our own region, it is very much overstaffed. There's a paid department in Groton that has a minimum manning of 5 people. We have 13. They cover 3.5 times the square miles that we cover here. Have that discussion with the taxpayers who are residents in the double tax district, the CCD. They'd like to hear your explanation why you continue to allow that to happen. The good news is their contract's up, and negotiations may kick up again when our chief returns, and we hope he returns soon and safely, but we don't know that timeline. The bottom line is you'll have a chance to look at those manning issues and ask whether they're appropriate levels. I think they're too high. I think 13 minimum manning is way out of proportion. It's certainly not sustainable, not affordable. The fact that you have to shift $900,000 from the general fund, which, by the way, means you're raising the cost of taxes on every homeowner in the entire city to pay for that. It's not a free ride, free lunch. You're simply trading one tax for another. It looks nice if you're in the double tax district, but you're raising their general fund tax at the same time. There's no pot of gold here either, folks. This is just another gimmick, but it comes with a higher burden. We've worked very hard to bring our fire departments together. You're opening up another whole door of hurt, anger, you name it. The taxpayers in the town are not going to take this laying down, and neither are the businesses, including some of the largest employers who were notified of this action today. They are not happy. They don't want to see a trend where a cost of a service is added to their cost to survive here, and they're not getting the benefit. But that's what you're doing tonight. Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Appreciate the information. I'm done.
I have a follow-up question for the comptroller.
Please do so. Yes.
That $300,000 and change, that's after you subtracted the anticipated overage in the school budget for the current fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, that's ballpark estimate. There's a lot that can happen during the month of June, tax collections and, you know, overtime, things of that nature. But $200,000-300,000 is my estimate right now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, to your second point, you're absolutely right, which is exactly why we put forward the RFP, the resolution for the RFP for the fire study, which, by the way, you voted against. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Alderwoman Gould?
So I have a follow-up question for the comptroller. What are we projecting right now will be the Board of Education's ask from the fund balance?
But the last estimate that I had seen was 1.1 million, so that's what I was using for the projection for this fiscal year. You know, hopefully it'll end up better than that, and we'll be in a better place. You know, we need the fund balance for cash flows, for uncertainties such as pandemics, so it's good to have the fund balance.
So if we have to give them the 1.1, if that's what they end up being short, then for everybody else, all the other departments, we have about $300,000.
Yeah, it's in excess of the 10%.
Right, that's what yes. So I'm hoping those poor departments will keep their pencils sharp.
Mr. Comptroller, I have another question. So basically, through Alderman Delucia's disclosure and question, we now know that they're dipping into the reserve fund balance again, over 7 figures, third year in a row.
It would be the third year in a row. You know, I don't know for certain that they're going to end in a deficit, but, you know, in preparing our projections, that's the best available information I have.
Thank you. John, you
Yeah,
grabbed your
I
mic.
just want to clarify the projection for the Board of Ed. It's a little muddy this year because of the school not being in session since March. Expenditures they made, but savings they made, that has to all net out. So it's a extraordinarily different year to make the projection. So it might be less. I don't want everybody to think that we have that 1.1 as a solid number. We don't. We're hoping it's the worst-case scenario at this point. We're not positive, and because we have no comparisons before, we've never had a situation where we've had 4 months of no school. There are not the savings that people think, because they're still paying all the teachers, the transportation is still being paid. So there are some savings, but there were some expenditures too. So the 1.1, I think, is a number that could change before the closeout, Mayor.
Up or down?
I'm hoping for down. But you know me.
Yeah,
I
I
plan
know.
for the worst.
We're not. You do. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Call the roll on the amendment, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes?
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
No.
Alderman Nash?
No.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
No.
It's 4-3.
Motion passes 4-3. The budget as amended before us. Is there further discussion? Call the roll, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was late getting my hand up, Mr. Mayor. No apology necessary. I would just like to say that you just said a moment ago that I just disclosed that I believe that the Board of Ed, or I should say the school system, is going to be $1.1 million over budget in the current fiscal year. We have all been getting projections for what their overage is going to be for this fiscal year. It cannot carry over into the next fiscal year. During the ad hoc committee, we discussed that overage at length and how we need to eliminate that from happening in the future. The superintendent has worked hard to get us to that point for her first budget cycle. So I don't want this council to think that I just disclosed a number that only I was privy to. This is, as the city manager said, our estimate, but there are a lot of moving parts to that estimate, but that has not been a secret information. It's been well known to the entire Board of Ed and the entire city council for quite some time. Additionally, in terms of the entirety of the budget, I'll say again, I believe that we've done the best that we could with the tools that we had and the resources at our disposal. And if we are carrying a deficit under the Board of Ed for the current fiscal year, again, that was why the primary focus for this budget is that there will be no such deficit at this time next year. And that is why I support the budget as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. To respond to your comment, First time I can recall that a member of the council acknowledged that they're incorporating a deficit intentionally authored by the board's overspending as part of their budget plan, and I thought that's why it needed to be part of the record. Thank you. President Pro Tem.
I don't think anyone, I'm kind of shocked because they've been talking about much larger deficits even at the beginning of the fiscal year. Part of the problem is that the Board of Ed never modified their spending plan. We've seen the talk here at the council about that. At least I read it in the newspapers, but there was never any action taken. And this is what perplexed me, and it's part of the reason why I'm here today, probably. In that, you know, to be quite frank, the tail has been wagging the dog. And that needed to stop. I think I've been pretty good in supporting a stance, and my colleagues agree that this cannot be allowed to continue. And I look forward, you know, and obviously you agree. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter, it's been allowed to continue for the past few years. Now those mistakes have been made, it's over, it's done. Let's fix it and move on. I think the amount we've given them is more than fair, and I think next year is going to be twice as difficult, to be perfectly honest with you. I really do. But we have to cross that bridge when we come to it. The bridge we have in front of us is the way it is, and that's how we choose to deal with it.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Nash on the budget as amended.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment real quick about we did nothing. I asked, what were we to do? They showed up. They didn't have their money. We're not going to pay the bill. We're going to sue people. They threatened to sue us. Holy cow. What were we supposed to do? The bill had to be paid. We did what we could. We gave what we had, and we covered what we needed to cover, just like anything else. At home, you don't get enough money, you take a loan out. And then you just put yourself further in debt. And that's what we did in Norwich. We put ourselves further in debt. But to say we didn't do anything, there was tons of conversations, tons of threats going back and forth. They marched people in here I was called names in the hallway, for Christ's sake, for giving them what we could give them. They went over budgeted. We paid the bills. That's what we have to do. We're the council. We paid the bills. We tried to get them to stay in their budget plan. We tried to keep everybody focused. So to say we sat up here and didn't do anything, that's not the case. I don't know what you wanted us to do. We asked what our options were, and the options were don't pay the bill or pay the bill. Well, we're certainly not going to not pay the bill. So that's what we did. And I love the school systems. I love the children. I love the city of Norwich. I don't know what to do. We don't have enough money. There's not enough money, period. And all we can do is turn around and raise the taxes. Eventually, that won't be an option for us either. I'm done. Let's just vote on this thing.
Yes, Alderman DeLucia, on the budget as amended.
I just want to be crystal clear on this point because you have now said it 2 times on the floor of this council, Mr. Mayor. I was not party to the current school year budget or current fiscal year budget for the Board of Education being deficit spending by design. The record shows that I voted no on the current year's budget, and that was the primary reason why that they could not exist with the amount of money that was allocated to them. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, you did vote just the way you cited, except you also offered an amendment to give them more than we could afford, and when that failed, that's when you voted no. We're going to go back in history. Let's get it straight. And just for the record, if the Board of Ed's listening, that's a civil process brought against you as members, as individuals. That's the only option a city has when you deliberately overspend your budget. That's an ugly process. In the statutes, the way they're written, there's no guarantee the city wins either. So if you're looking for other options, what we could have done, that's it. Sue them in court for civil damages as people. That would have a very chilling effect. Who would run for the Board of Ed ever again in this city if you did that? There aren't really options out there other than hold their feet to the fire. And I will go with you, Alderman Betancourt, and push that issue upon them. And if they fail to act appropriately, I'll take that risk and take them to court with you, as you have stated throughout this entire budget process. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Wilson.
So I may be the optimistic one here, but I look at this as the bright side. You know, things happened in the past, can't take them back. This is a new council, new Board of Ed, new superintendent. NFA will be having a new head of schools in a matter of weeks. They've got a new Board of Trustees chair. I look at these things and the times that we're in. We've known since February that this was going to be a tough situation since the virus situation. But the other part that I look at is when we started, going back to President Pro Tem Betancourt's point, how can you have solved it? I think we look at just what we did this year and the optimistic piece of improving communication. You know, so I think moving forward, we can't continue to throw the stones at one another and expect that that solves the problems. I think continuing to have these lines of communication, the ad hoc committee, they know they're, you know, my suggestion would be as soon as we can, we continue to the discussions and dialogue on what the process looks like for next year's budget. We continue to hash those things out. We've got more than 6 months, well more than 6 months to get it done. So I think part of it is we've improved communications. Let's take out the criticism, let's take out the back and forth of blaming, and let's just sit down and continue to roll up our sleeves and work with one another to come up with a plan. Are our plans going to be perfect? Absolutely not. That's the best part about this process is the disagreements and agreements help us get to the compromise of where we need to be. We all know that this is a difficult time. We know there are uncertainties with revenue and all these other moving parts. But the part we were elected to do was to lay a foundation, a vision of where we think the city is best suited in going. And I think part of that is looking at the elements of this budget process that were implemented to improving it. The ad hoc committee did phenomenal work for the circumstances that we were in as far as the timing of meetings, the circumstances of what we were in. I applaud myself and Alderwoman Gould for asking the hard questions during the Budget and Expenditures Committee meetings that we attended. And quite frankly, the discussion's not over. We pass a budget tonight. It's still our obligation, I believe, to work with the Board of Ed to make sure they not only live within their budget, but they find solutions as we move into talking about next fiscal year and what those challenges may bring. We're not going to wait until the last minute to start working on it. It's something that I think we work to improve processes so that we find the efficiencies and how things are done moving forward. That's what we're elected to do. We're elected to find the efficiencies in all areas. So the Board of Ed is not excluded. If we're working on finding efficiencies on the city side, they're another part of this city, and it's our obligation. We may not make the recommendations for cuts and additions and changes, but it's our duty as well, I believe, to work to make sure that we find those efficiencies. And we work on some of them. We've had the conversations about payroll and different things. So to sit here and continue to play the blame game, I want to look at the optimistic side of things. This is a new way that we're charting forward. We're going to use the things that we have in place to continue to move forward. And we know we were elected to do the hard work. But part of that is finding new ways to do it. And I think, you know, us forming the ad hoc committee early on and them doing a lot of work is just the start of where we're going. So we can't continue to throw these daggers at them. We've got to give them a chance to respond. We've got to give this new Board of Ed an opportunity to do their work. And to throw it on them that they've got to do all the work tomorrow night, that's disingenuous. Because quite frankly, they're also dealing with a situation of not knowing what next fall brings when they start to open up the schools. So they've got some time. But I think them doing the hard work over time of living within the budget we've given them is where we start. But we've got to give them a chance to do the work as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman DeLucia.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles.
Yes.
Alderman Wilson.
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould.
No.
Alderman Nash.
No.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt.
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
No.
That's 4 to 3.
Motion passes 4 to 3. Budget is adopted as amended.
Number 2, relative to the adoption of the appropriations ordinance for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Motion to bring this forward, but then I think I'm going to ask for time for Josh. Do you need additional time?
No, I can give you the
Okay,
appropriations.
very good, thank you. Is there such a motion? Alderman Wilson, is there a second? Alderman Miles?
So the total appropriations number for general fund, CCD, and TCD is $141,089,078. $141,089,078.
Yes. Pro Tem Bettencourt, please.
Would also motion to add the June 8th, 2020 date.
A second, please. Oh. Motion by Bettencourt, seconded by Mr. Wilson. And, okay, all those in favor of the amendment to add June 8th, please?
Alderman DeLucia.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles.
Yes.
Alderman Wilson.
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Nash.
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt.
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
Yes.
That's 7 to 0.
Motion passed 7 to 0. Please.
So we just voted on the amendment.
Yeah.
Is-
Change the date.
I know we did.
Yes.
Yes, so we got one more.
On the overall resolution?
We amended the resolution to add the date, so we still have to vote on the resolution, amended with the date affixed.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Alderman DeLucia.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles.
Yes.
Alderman Wilson.
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould.
No.
Alderman Nash.
No.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt.
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
No.
4 to 3.
Motion passes 4 to 3.
Number 3, relative to the adoption of the tax levy ordinance for fiscal year 2021.
A motion, please, to bring Resolution 3 forward. Alderman Wilson, second. Alderwoman Miles. Josh, the floor is yours.
In section 1 of the tax levy ordinance, the blank should be in 42.06 mils should be inserted in the blank space.
40.
42.06 mils. In section 2, 0.32 mils should be inserted in the blank.
0.
In section 3, 6.41 mils should be inserted in the blank space.
6 point, sorry.
6.41. And finally, in section 4, 2.94 mils should be inserted in the blank space.
Please say that again?
2.94 mils.
I'll sec.
The date also on this one.
I'm sorry?
The date on this one
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would motion that we amend the resolution as indicated by the controller and also add the date of June 8th.
Thank you. Is there a second? Alderman Wilson, seconded. Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, call the roll on the amendment, please.
Alderman DeLucia.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles.
Yes.
Alderman Wilson,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
This is on the amendment only? Yes.
Yes.
Alderman Nash,
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt,
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
Yes.
That is 7-0.
Okay, thank you. The resolution as amended, is there discussion? Okay, and I have a question. In section 4, Josh, we added 2.94 mils. That's when the assessment comes forward on the motor vehicles, that's actually above and beyond the 45 cap that the state
So
imposes?
The cap is 45 mils, so the total amount of mils that can be charged in the CCD can only be 2.94, which is 45 mils minus the 42.06 in section 1.
Okay,
So that's the reason for that.
okay, thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution as amended? I will simply say that I'll be voting no. We're in a pandemic. Thousands of people are out of work in this city, and we're just raising taxes as if there's no impact on their lives. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Wilson.
I just want to state that when we look at this, but also if we look at even the city manager's budget, taxes would have been increased. So I just want to point that out as well. So this is not just the council. We disregarded the city manager's budget. There was already an increase that was going to be in that budget. So I want individuals to know we did our part of working with the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman DeLucia,
Yes.
Alderman Miles,
Yes.
Alderman Wilson,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
No.
Alderman Nash,
No.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt,
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
No.
So it is 4-3.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
One moment.
Hold on.
Hold up.
What do we got now?
No, it's just for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You all
Wait.
set?
May I?
Yes.
Just say something? We're going to just read a proclamation into the record unless there's an
Oh,
objection.
yeah, okay, that's right.
Is there any?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Well, traditionally, we acknowledge the efforts of our original settlers, and that's what this proclamation does. The founders of Norwich, 36, I believe, original families, 13 are still here, which is pretty cool, 13 generations. They're still with us, and a lot of them you know. They make contributions to our community. So on Saturday, the founders' annual meeting was held at the Leffingwell Inn. We were sitting outside, socially distanced, with masks and so forth. And I presented the proclamation to the present, Dane Rue. But I want it on the record for the city as well to be aware. Whereas 361 years ago, Norwich was founded by settlers from Saybrook on land purchased from Uncas, Sachem, the Mohegan Native American nation. And whereas the households comprising the original settlers included women and children and servants representing more than 35 men traditionally regarded as founders of Norwich. And whereas the Society of Founders was established on October 10th, 1901 as an historical organization to promote the history of Norwich from its founding. And whereas the Society of Founders saved the former Leffingwell House from demolition, restored it, and maintained it as a museum of the history of our community dating to the period of early settlement. And whereas the Leffingwell House Museum was first built as a two-room dwelling about 1675 by Stephen Backus, expanded as an inn after 1701 by Thomas Leffingwell, and transformed into the elegant home of Christopher Leffingwell in the mid-1700s. And whereas the Leffingwell House Museum is a valuable asset to the city of Norwich, and its citizens appreciate the hard work the Society of Founders of Norwich have done in maintaining this significant colonial building. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Peter Albert Nystrom, and Norwich City Council President Pro Tem Mark Bettencourt, on behalf of the Norwich City Council and the citizens of the city of Norwich, do hereby declare June 6th, last Saturday, 2020, as Founders Day at the Leffingwell House Museum, and thank the Society of Founders for all their hard work and dedication on behalf of the city of Norwich. And it was delivered the dated 6th day of June 2020, signed by myself and President Pro Tem Mark Bettencourt. And thank you for your indulgence. Tracy?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. Roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes?
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yep.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes,
7-0.
we are adjourned.
We